Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. In the deepest hollows of imperial bureaucracy, there exists an organ so vast and amorphous, it defies comprehension, an institution that fears no foe but itself. The Inquisition is the hand of the Emperor, yes, but it is also the dagger in the dark, the executioner behind the veil, and the whisperer of truths too dangerous to name. Its agents purge the Imperium of rot with ruthless efficiency. But what happens when that rot festers within the Inquisition itself? Who watches the watchers? Who judges the judges? There are rumors, just barely audible beneath the clamor of bolter fire and the chant of liturgies. Rumors of secret gatherings, invisible tribunals, and faceless inquisitors who sit in judgment over their own, without trial, without record, without appeal. They call it the Silent Synod, though none dare confirm its existence. It is said to convene when even the most radical elements of the Ordos are shaken, when power itself becomes the threat. And if the Synod comes for you, it does not announce itself. It does not knock. It erases. The Inquisition is one of the few institutions in the Imperium granted a paradoxical privilege, absolute autonomy under the Emperor's divine mandate. No planetary governor, no Cardinal Astral, no Adeptus Astartes chapter master, none may command an Inquisitor. This freedom, enshrined not in law but in terror and custom, was meant to serve a noble purpose, to safeguard the Imperium from its most insidious threats without political obstruction or bureaucratic delay. Yet this same freedom becomes an ethical crucible when the wielders of such power are fallible mortals, not divine instruments. Every Inquisitor operates as a self-contained jurisdiction. They select their own agents, interpret imperial doctrine as necessity dictates, and pass judgment on entire worlds if required. The Inquisition does not function as a hierarchy so much as a constellation of ideologies, bound only by an oath to the Emperor and a shared hatred of heresy. In theory, the Emperor alone judges them. But the Emperor is silent. He does not speak. He does not intervene. In the void of his voice, it is the Inquisitors themselves who interpret his will, and in doing so, each becomes a law unto themselves. What emerges is a landscape of unchecked authority. The only restraint on an Inquisitor's action is the reaction of their peers. Yet even this is not oversight in the traditional sense. It is not a courtroom, not a senate, not a tribunal with structure or transparency. It is the invisible architecture of fear, rivalry, and ideological opposition. A Puritan may see radicalism as heresy incarnate. A Recongregator may see the status quo as the true treachery. These ideological divides shape not only operations but fates. One Inquisitor's truth is another's blasphemy. The autonomy of the Inquisition is also a shadowed echo of the Emperor's original intent. In the distant days of the Great Crusade, the Emperor envisioned a galaxy governed by reason, not dogma. The Inquisition, conceived after the Horus Heresy, is a bitter inversion of that vision, founded to root out the very corruption that reason could not contain. Its unfettered structure reflects not strength but desperation. When the foe lies within, when even trusted servants may turn, only an agency free of all chains can strike preemptively. But therein lies the cruel joke. Autonomy begets opacity, and in that opacity, rot thrives. Across the galaxy, Inquisitors diverge wildly in their conduct. Some rule fiefdoms like petty kings. Others disappear into the void for centuries, re-emerging to demand the annihilation of entire systems. Few are questioned, and fewer still are opposed. A planetary governor may protest a demand for exterminatus, but will be overruled or silenced. An Adeptus Mechanicus Magos may query the necessity of artifact seizure, but cannot bar the Inquisitor's path. To defy one is to risk censure, annihilation, or accusations of heresy. This structure was forged out of necessity. The threats the Inquisition confronts, demons, genestealers, warp anomalies, do not permit time for consultation. And so, in times of desperate need, this autonomy saves worlds. But it also means that a mad Inquisitor can doom entire sectors. And worse, such madness might be called conviction by others. The Inquisition's autonomy also shields it from meaningful reform. There is no single point of authority to pressure, no clear body of governance. To propose oversight is to suggest vulnerability. To suggest vulnerability is to court suspicion. Thus, the system perpetuates itself, self-reinforcing through fear and legacy. Even when patterns of abuse emerge, they are buried beneath secrecy. A wayward Inquisitor is not tried in public. They are judged, if at all, in darkness. This lack of formal accountability breeds an aura of godhood. Inquisitors are not seen as people, but as avatars of wrath. Civilians fear them as manifestations of divine judgment. Other imperial institutions treat them as anomalies, unpredictable, untouchable, lethal. And many inquisitors begin to believe their own myth. When one carries the emperor's will, who can contradict them? Yet not all inquisitors are blind to the dangers. Some whisper of the need for reform. Some seek to build covert networks of mutual observation. And some vanish, perhaps drawn into a deeper game, into the whispered mechanisms that lie beneath even the Inquisition's terrifying surface. It is in this shadowed tension, between the myth of individual divine authority and the silent necessity of internal restraint, that the seeds of the Silent Synod find fertile ground. Among the many twisted paradoxes that define the Inquisition, none are more defining or more destructive than the internal rivalries that writhe beneath its surface. These are not petty disputes or bureaucratic turf wars. They are ideological crusades fought in shadow, with words that can kill and secrets that burn. The Inquisition eats its own not merely by accident, but as a function of its design. It is a crucible where paranoia is policy and suspicion is sanctity. Inquisitors are not assigned alignment or loyalty. They gravitate toward philosophies that justify their actions and echo their fears. The divide between Puritan and radical is not cosmetic. It is theological warfare waged across centuries. A Puritan may believe in absolute adherence to the emperor's word, in the purity of humanity, and in the rejection of any alien tool or forbidden knowledge. A radical, meanwhile, might see the warp as a weapon to be mastered, the Xenos as a means to survival, the faithless masses as clay to be reshaped. These aren't differences of opinion. They're mutually exclusive visions of reality. And when two inquisitors meet with opposing creeds, the result can be anything from whispered sabotage to open combat. Some inquisitors maintain black archives filled with the sins of their peers, not for justice, but for leverage. Others dedicate lifetimes to building cases against ideological foes, waiting for one misstep to justify execution. It is not unknown for entire retinues to be massacred under the suspicion of radical taint, only for the accusing inquisitor to vanish shortly after. The most harrowing aspect of these rivalries is their normalization. No one is surprised when inquisitors clash. No one questions when an entire Ordo cell is purged under mysterious circumstances. It is understood, almost expected, that the Inquisition will cannibalize itself. And this culture of internal purging is reinforced by the belief that only the truly righteous survive. To question a superior may be seen as treason. To eliminate a peer may be called devotion. When truth is flexible, so too is justice. Famous historical events mark the peaks of these internecine purges. The Helican Schism saw dozens of inquisitors vanish, imprisoned, or slain in a web of accusations centered on Xenos tech usage. The Cadian heresy trials, though cloaked in secrecy, are rumored to have resulted in the deaths of more inquisitors than chaos cultists. And the Arcadia Reconciliation, a misnamed bloodletting, left 3 entire subsectors without inquisitorial presence for decades. So thorough was the mutual annihilation. In this culture of mistrust, many inquisitors travel with heavily armed entourages, not just to confront threats, but to survive meetings with each other. To receive a summons from a peer is to question whether one will return. Conclaves, those rare gatherings of inquisitorial minds, are less about consensus and more about cold assessments of danger, power, and risk. It is said that some inquisitors never speak at conclave, not out of shyness, but out of fear that their words may be twisted into warrants. Retinues play a dangerous role in this theater of suspicion. An acolyte who defects or is captured may become the source of damning information. Interrogators. Inquisitors in training often learn more from watching how rivals fall than from any manual or sermon. The apprentices of executed inquisitors face a harrowing decision: defend their master's legacy and risk association, or denounce them and prove loyalty. There are no neutral parties in this war of ideals. Purge culture also infects how the Inquisition interfaces with the Imperium. An inquisitor quick to censure a governor for laxity might do so not out of concern, but to signal zeal to rivals. Planetary purges may be used as political moves, demonstrations of orthodoxy meant to forestall accusations. And sometimes, an entire campaign against heresy is but a smokescreen to eliminate an ideological foe under the cover of righteous warfare. Even alliances are fraught. Temporary pacts may be forged between inquisitors of shared vision, but these are as likely to end in betrayal as in success. Some circles persist across centuries, bound by shared secrets and mutual protection. But even these are brittle. One whispered doubt, one intercepted communique, and the entire network may implode in executions. This is not madness. It is the operating logic of an institution designed without oversight. The only counterweight to power is more power. The only check on ambition is rival ambition. In such a system, suspicion becomes sanity. Every ally is a potential threat, every truth a weapon. And in this bloody ballet, the only constant is that someone is always watching, always judging. In the shadows where these rivalries metastasize, it is said that a different kind of judgment sometimes falls. A silent one. When inquisitors go too far, when purges become too frequent, too personal, too dangerous, the rumors begin. Of a name whispered once and never again. Of a reckoning without trial, without precedent. The Silent Synod may not exist, but in the darkest corners of the Inquisition, its presence is felt like the weight of a blade behind the neck. The Inquisition is not only a force of investigation and judgment, it is a war machine. Each of its great divisions, the Ordos Majoris, is armed with its own dedicated military arm, its Chamber Militant. These are the hammer to the Inquisitor's scalpel, the storm unleashed when heresy must be purged with fire and blade. The Ordo Malleus commands the Grey Knights, peerless demon hunters whose very existence is a secret. The Ordo Xenos wields the Death Watch, a mosaic of space marines reforged into hunters of the alien. And the Ordo Hereticus has the Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle, who burn the mutant, the witch, and the traitor with unflinching faith. These forces serve the Inquisition with unbreakable loyalty. But that loyalty is also dangerous. It creates a culture where even the most extreme inquisitorial orders are carried out without question. The Chambers Militant are not structured to ask why. They are structured to obey, to act, to cleanse. And in this unquestioning obedience lies a silence that enables horror. When an inquisitor calls upon their Chamber Militant, it is not done lightly. These are not armies for siege warfare or planetary conquest. They are surgical strikes, divine retribution embodied. A Grey Knight strike cruiser arriving in orbit signals that demonic infestation is certain. A Death Watch kill team's deployment heralds a Xenos threat so dire that even Astartes chapters cannot act alone. And when the Sororitas descend with hymns and Prometheum, entire populations may be cleansed without explanation. The obedience of these warriors is not ignorance. The veterans of the Chambers Militant know the price of corruption. They know the signs of a tainted inquisitor, those who delve too deep into the warp, who consort with Xenos tech, who wield forbidden relics with reckless confidence. Yet they remain silent. Partly, this is discipline, partly it is fear, and partly it is faith that any such darkness is wielded for the greater good. This silence creates a brutal complicity. When an inquisitor's zeal becomes fanaticism, when purges extend beyond strategic necessity into sadistic ritual, the Chamber Militant executes orders nonetheless. A Grey Knight will purge a demon host and never report how it came to be. A Death Watch captain may observe their commanding inquisitor pocketing Xenos artifacts and say nothing. A canoness may suspect her master orchestrates heresies to justify his purges, but will still burn the accused. This is not cowardice. It is structure. The Chambers Militant are not watchdogs. They have no mechanisms for oversight. If they report an inquisitor, to whom do they report? Who has the authority to investigate an inquisitor who commands the will of the emperor himself? And more chilling still, what if the inquisitor's actions, no matter how heretical, truly are necessary? When the line between salvation and damnation blurs, silence is not just safety. It is survival. Some within the Chambers Militant seek answers. There are whispered tales of Grey Knights who quietly alter records, who ensure a corrupted inquisitor never returns from the battlefield. Some say that Death Watch captains, when faced with the most egregious crimes, take matters into their own hands, executing inquisitors and fabricating combat fatalities. Among the sororitas, repentance can be violent. Canonesses may lead their flocks into suicidal purges, not as acts of zeal, but as covert atonement for what they have enabled. Yet these acts are never openly admitted. There is no public reckoning, no tribunal, no process. The Chambers Militant do not judge, they act, they cleanse, and they bury their dead in silence. There have been moments, rare and terrible, when a Chamber Militant has turned on its master. These are shrouded in mystery, buried by redacted reports and suspicious silence. A Grey Knight librarian struck down by his own brothers. A Death Watch fortress that detonated with its entire command structure inside. A Sister Superior last seen dragging an Inquisitor into the flames she had kindled. Such tales are not lessons. They are warnings. That even within the martial arm of the Inquisition, the judgment of the judge is a dangerous thing. And in this structure of loyalty without oversight, the seeds of unchecked power grow. The Inquisition's martial arm is both shield and sword, but never mirror. It does not reflect, it does not question. And so the Chambers Militant, for all their purity, may become tools of corruption as easily as they are instruments of salvation. Some say there is another answer. That in rare, terrible cases, when the Chambers Militant cannot act, when the Inquisitor's authority is too great or their power too entrenched, another force intervenes. Something not bound by duty or chain of command. Something older, quieter, and infinitely more precise. The weight of that silence, of judgment without acknowledgement, of death without record, has a name among those who know to fear it. The Silent Synod. The Imperium of Man is an empire built on decay, its foundations rooted in millennia-old dogma, and the crumbling remnants of a golden age long lost. Most Inquisitors accept this as necessary, a calcified fortress against the encroaching dark. But not all. A small, heretical minority within the Inquisition believes the Imperium must die so that something stronger, purer, and more righteous might rise from its ashes. These are the Recongregators, and their ideology, whispered in catacombs and coded in forbidden tomes, has ignited some of the most violent internal purges in inquisitorial history. Recongregators do not merely question the status quo, they reject it entirely. To them, the Imperium is no longer a divine instrument of the Emperor's will, but a decaying carcass choking on its own rituals, corruption, and ossified bureaucracy. They believe that only through destruction can rebirth occur. Entire planetary governments, ecclesiastical hierarchies, and adeptus branches must be dismantled, either through destabilization or direct intervention. Where Puritans see divine order, Recongregators see tyranny. Where others see heresy, they see opportunity. This belief system is not born of malice, but of desperation. Many Recongregators begin as loyal servants who, after centuries of witnessing institutional failure and catastrophic loss, reach a breaking point. They see how planetary governors hoard power, how the ecclesiarchy commodifies faith, how the administratum strangles hope with endless forms. They do not turn to chaos. They do not embrace alien thought. They turn inward to the one place change might be possible, the Inquisition itself. Their methods are subtle, surgical. A corrupt planetary noble might suffer a sudden scandal, followed by political ruin. An ecclesiarchal schism may mysteriously erupt, weakening the local clergy's hold. A vital shipping lane may be sabotaged to expose logistical decay. These actions are justified not as rebellion, but as cleansing acts, calculated chaos meant to spark transformation. And when transformation fails, they call it proof of the Imperium's need to fall. But within the Inquisition, even whispers of recongregation are poison. To question the Imperium is one thing. To act against it, even under the guise of renewal, is seen as treason. The reaction to discovered Recongregators is swift, savage, and absolute. No trial, no leniency, only death. They are hunted by their former peers, burned alongside the very heretics they sought to outmaneuver. And yet, like a toxin in the bloodstream, their ideology persists. The exposure of a prominent Recongregator can trigger an avalanche of suspicion. The death of Inquisitor Varrox, whose private archives revealed detailed plans to overthrow the planetary regime of Carthax Prime, ignited the Theta Concord purges. Dozens of Inquisitors, some only loosely affiliated with him, were rounded up and executed. The Helvetine conclaves dissolved amid accusations of ideological contamination. Even those who merely debated the merits of reform found themselves under scrutiny. The Inquisition, which thrives on secrecy and autonomy, finds itself vulnerable to this ideological virus because it has no central doctrine. A radical may adopt Recongregator tactics without realizing it. A Puritan may be accused simply for advocating efficient reorganization. The line between belief and heresy becomes razor thin, and in the absence of oversight, fear fills the gap. Better to burn an uncertain peer than to risk infection. This climate of terror breeds not unity, but schism. Factions within Ordos isolate themselves, conclaves fracture, collaboration decays, and all the while, the Recongregators continue their work, not in open rebellion, but in subversion. Their goal is not to overthrow the Imperium in a single stroke. It is to weaken it from within to make its fall seem inevitable, even logical. They spread despair like spores, and in the hollow they leave behind, they plant visions of a better tomorrow. It is tempting, even seductive. For those who have seen the worst of the Imperium, the starving billions, the mindless ritualism, the endless cruelty, the Recongregator vision offers a sliver of hope. That perhaps the Emperor intended more. That perhaps this wretched empire is not his true dream, but a twisted echo. That perhaps by tearing it down, one serves his will more faithfully than those who preserve it. This is why Recongregators are not merely hunted, they are feared. Because their logic has weight, their arguments strike deep. And once an Inquisitor begins to question, not just individuals, not just sects, but the entire machine, they stand on the precipice of ideological oblivion. Yet some claim that not all Recongregators are dead. Some whisper that the most successful ones are those never exposed. That they still operate, not as rogues but as judges. That they gather in places of silence, shrouded from all surveillance, and that they do not merely seek change, they enforce it. Could the Silent Synod be born of Recongregator roots? Could it be the logical end of their creed, not destruction for rebirth, but judgment from within? A new kind of justice, without dogma, without allegiance, without mercy. To be declared Excommunicate Traitoris is to be unmade, not merely exiled or denounced, but erased from the spiritual and historical record of the Imperium. It is a term of ultimate condemnation, a brand placed upon those whose heresy is so profound, so dangerous, that it eclipses even death. Inquisitors themselves have wielded this brand against rogue elements, rebel leaders, and even Space Marine chapters. But what happens when that black mark is turned inward upon the Inquisition itself? The myth of the Excommunicate Traitoris holds a terrible gravity. It suggests that even Inquisitors, those most trusted with the defense of the Imperium, can fall so far that no redemption is possible. And yet its use against members of the Inquisition is vanishingly rare. Officially, only a handful of Inquisitors have ever been declared such, and even these cases are buried under layers of conflicting reports, redacted transcripts, and outright disappearances. It raises the question, is this rarity a sign of the Inquisition's integrity or its absolute control over perception? Inquisitor Malchior Vex was one such figure. A radical of extraordinary power and ambition, he conducted forbidden experiments into demonic fusion, convinced he could harness their energies for loyalist ends. When discovered, his fortress was stormed not by a rival Ordo, but by an anonymous force. Records suggest an amalgam of Deathwatch veterans and assassins operating without clear command structure. He was declared Excommunicate Traitoris posthumously. But the declaration did not come from an inquisitorial conclave. It came from a hidden quorum. Some whisper it was the Synod. Excommunication is not merely punitive, it is preventative. It is designed to erase all legacy, to prevent martyrdom, to deny history. When an inquisitor is declared excommunicate, their works are destroyed, their agents hunted, their name cursed. Acolytes are burned with their knowledge. Allies are turned upon. Their deeds, however noble, are rewritten as villainy. Their philosophies, if they survive at all, do so only in the margins of forbidden texts. And yet, the process of declaring an inquisitor excommunicate traitoris is not formalized. There is no known ritual, no central authority that publishes such proclamations. Instead, it seems to emerge from consensus, a dangerous, mutable thing. A whisper in the right conclave, a rumor seeded across Ordos, a sudden alignment of ideologues. And then one day, the name is forbidden. The face becomes a mask of shame. To speak their defense is to court their fate. This lack of process leads many to believe that such declarations are more political than moral. That a Puritan faction may brand a radical to eliminate dissent. That a powerful inquisitor may orchestrate the fall of a rival by manufacturing guilt. It becomes not justice but narrative control. Not punishment for evil, but erasure of the inconvenient. There is also the question of who enforces these declarations. If no central tribunal exists, who gives the order to kill? Who mobilizes resources? Some believe that certain senior inquisitors carry with them unofficial writs of authority, slate tablets etched with the names of those to be extinguished without ceremony. Others speak of black vaults where names are written in code, and agents are dispatched without ever knowing the full truth of their target. This covert machinery hints at something far darker than mere ideological conflict. It suggests an invisible body, a group that operates above or beneath the Ordos, with the power to declare, to judge, and to eliminate. A body that answers to no one, not even the High Lords of Terra. The legend of the Silent Synod often intersects with these whispers. It is said they do not brand one excommunicate, they make them vanish completely. And in doing so, they cleanse not only the person, but the idea. The fear of such judgment shapes behavior across the Inquisition. An inquisitor may abandon a line of inquiry, not because it is dangerous, but because it echoes the path of one who was erased. Radical cells may cloak themselves in the language of orthodoxy, disguising innovation as tradition. And when a peer disappears, most do not ask questions. To inquire is to draw attention. To draw attention is to risk judgment. Some deny that any of this is real, that the branding of inquisitors is so rare because it is simply unnecessary, that the system self-regulates, that the threat of mutual destruction is enough. But others, those who have seen the black ships leave without explanation, who have received coded messages from former friends, who have found conclaves emptied overnight, know better. They do not speak of the Excommunicate Traitoris in past tense. They speak in warnings. To be cast out is not to be punished. It is to be unpersoned, forgotten, deleted. And when that fate can come without trial, without defense, without acknowledgement, one begins to wonder who truly controls the levers of inquisitorial power. There are no official courts within the Inquisition, no sanctioned tribunals, no codified legal bodies, no juries or panels to weigh the actions of its agents. Such structures are deemed unnecessary, indeed heretical, within a body that claims to answer only to the Emperor. And yet, judgments are passed, fates are decided, inquisitors vanish. These acts do not occur in open halls or before the light of truth. They happen in the silence between words, in shadowed gatherings, in what can only be described as informal courts. Secret councils. To the uninitiated, these councils might seem spontaneous, a few concerned inquisitors gathering to compare notes. But within the Inquisition, nothing is spontaneous. Every meeting is a statement. Every gathering is an act of alignment. When 3 or more inquisitors meet in private, there is always the possibility, unspoken yet undeniable, that judgment will follow, that someone will not leave. These councils have no names, or rather, too many. The Ferric Circle, the Hollow Nine, the Veiled Lantern. Each name is likely a lie, a cover, a misdirection. Some are thought to form around ideological lines, others around common cause or mutual blackmail. Some persist for decades, operating as shadow administrations within the Ordos. Others form and dissolve within a single night, gathered to address one issue, one individual, one perceived threat. There are no rules governing these bodies, but there are patterns. Typically, an inquisitor accused of wrongdoing is not invited to defend themselves. They are observed, discussed, judged. If the consensus is execution, it is carried out without warning. If the decision is exile, the accused will find their resources vanish, their authority questioned, their agents scattered. And if the verdict is silence, true silence, then all records of their deeds begin to fade. Access codes revoked, missions reassigned, memory itself begins to bend. Sometimes the councils operate through proxies, acolytes turned, retinues flipped, kill teams redirected. The accused may never even realize their death was decided in absentia by those they once called peers. Other times, the councils act with terrifying transparency, appearing unannounced in the chambers of the accused, delivering a verdict with a single look, and executing judgment before any word can be spoken. These councils are not necessarily aligned with righteousness. They are not paragons of justice. They are survival mechanisms, political cabals, self-appointed regulators. Their motives vary wildly. One council may act out of genuine concern for a peer's descent into heresy. Another may simply wish to consolidate power. In a system where oversight is absent, morality becomes personal. And in such a climate, even noble intent can breed horror. Inquisitor Alethion Mir, once lauded as a brilliant Puritan of the Ordo Malleus, vanished during what was reported as a conclave of war planning. Weeks later, his fortress was found in ruins, his name purged from all conclave rolls. It is said a vote was held, 7 against 1. No trial, no explanation, just absence. And it is in these absences that the true power of these councils resides. They do not seek to explain, they seek to remove. Occasionally, these informal courts clash. One council may shelter a radical under investigation by another. When this occurs, the result is a shadow war, silent and deadly. Agents vanish, blackmail is deployed, planets are sacrificed as bargaining chips, and through it all, the Imperium remains unaware, believing itself protected by a unified Inquisition, never suspecting the civil war beneath its armor. In this landscape of silent warfare, survival demands alliances. But every alliance is temporary. Today's protector may be tomorrow's accuser. Trust is not a currency within the Inquisition, it is a liability. And so, many Inquisitors walk alone, hoping that isolation will shield them from judgment. It does not. For some, these councils are necessary evils. In the absence of structure, they argue, someone must act, someone must judge. Better the devil you know. But others see them as proof of rot, that the Inquisition has become a snake devouring its own tail, unable to distinguish between purging heresy and protecting ego. The existence of these secret gatherings raises a darker possibility. If informal courts can pass such irreversible judgments, what then of a body that operates even beyond them? A force not of alliance, but of finality. A group that does not deliberate, but executes. No votes, no debates, only the sentence. Some believe these informal councils are watched, that their judgments are themselves judged. That when they go too far, or not far enough, they too are visited. By silence, by erasure, by something older and colder than conscience. There are rumors that the Inquisition is not as autonomous as it appears, that hidden within the veiled corridors of the Tricorn palaces, the monumental fortresses from which inquisitorial activity is often coordinated, there exists a fourth Ordo, not Ordo Malleus, Hereticus, or Xenos, not even one of the recognized Minoris. Something else. Something above. The Tricorn Conspiracy, as whispered in the darkest corners of acolyte cantinas and the deranged ravings of captured heretics, speaks of a hidden hand, a shadow command that oversees the Inquisition itself. This so-called Fourth Ordo is said to be invisible, unnamed, and entirely outside any official structure. Some call it the Ordo Obscurus, others the Ordo Internum. But most know it simply as the Tricorn Conspiracy. If it exists, it does not wear its power openly. Its agents do not flash rosettes, they do not call conclaves, they do not deliver sermons or edicts. They observe, they archive, and when necessary, they act. The idea is not new. Since the founding of the Inquisition, there has always been suspicion that someone somewhere must be watching the watchers. It is a logical necessity. Any organization granted absolute authority, even in the Emperor's name, must have a fail-safe. And yet, no formal documentation exists, no records, no signatories, only silence. The conspiracy takes its name from the tricorn, a symbol worn on the rosettes of all inquisitors, a three-cornered hat historically associated with secrecy and inquisitorial power. But those who whisper of the conspiracy suggest a fourth point, hidden, unseen, the corner that controls the rest. It is a symbol that appears in dreams, in code, in the final scribbled notes of those about to vanish. 3 points visible, 1 in shadow. According to the theory, this fourth Ordo is not driven by ideology. It is not radical or Puritan, recongregator, or monodominant. It exists to preserve the Inquisition itself as an institution, not to protect the Imperium, but to maintain the myth of the Inquisition's infallibility. If an Inquisitor becomes too visible, too unstable, too ideological, they become a threat to that myth. And when that happens, the Fourth Ordo intervenes, not to judge, but to remove. Some believe its agents operate as librarians, archivists, or mere clerks, faceless workers in the Tricorn palaces who oversee dossiers, track anomalies, and profile behavior. Others believe they are something more extreme. Nulls, blanks, psycher-silencing wraiths drawn from the depths of Terra's forbidden vaults. There are stories of entire retinues being wiped from existence, not through violence, but through administrative annihilation. Deleted records, reassigned agents, eroded memory. Critics of the conspiracy argue that the Inquisition is too fractured to support such a centralized force, that the very idea of oversight contradicts its founding principle. But proponents counter that this is precisely why such a group would remain secret. It must exist outside the knowledge of its subjects. It cannot be a branch, it must be a root. There are case studies cited by believers. Inquisitor Halor Krine, whose archives on ancient Xenos religions vanished overnight, shortly before he was found dead. Officially from cardiac arrest, despite being only 97. Interrogator Nira Val, who made contact with 5 former Inquisitors thought executed, only to vanish herself days later. The Aegis Tower incident, where 57 inquisitorial personnel were locked down and purged following a suspected breach in Tricorn Command. No Inquisitor ever took responsibility. No explanation was given. But all records were sealed under an unknown encryption protocol. Some believe the Fourth Ordo acts only when traditional methods fail, that it allows the internal rivalries, the informal courts, the ideological purges to self-regulate the body. But when an element proves too resistant, when factionalism threatens the whole, then the hidden hand intervenes. Surgical. Final. This belief raises disturbing implications. If the Fourth Ordo exists, then the Inquisition's autonomy is a lie. Its freedom is conditional, granted at the pleasure of a silent master. Worse, if it does not exist, if the Tricorn Conspiracy is merely myth, then the events ascribed to it must be the actions of something else, something less organized, more primal. Which is more terrifying, that there is a hidden oversight group, or that there is not, and the darkness has simply found its own way to judge. Acolytes who dig too deep into these rumors find themselves isolated. Resources dry up, missions end in ambush, contacts forget them, and sometimes their own Inquisitors receive orders to terminate them, without reason, without justification. The paranoia becomes a feedback loop. If one believes in the Tricorn Conspiracy, then any misfortune confirms it. If one does not believe, then any investigation risks making it real. For some, the Tricorn Conspiracy is not the answer, but a distraction, a red herring seeded by the real power. Because beneath even this shadowy theory, there is a darker myth of something not organizational but ritual, not administrative but ancient, not a conspiracy but a synod. They do not leave trails, they do not send emissaries. There are no rosettes, no banners, no oaths taken beneath the Aquila. And yet, among the Inquisition, there is a name spoken in terror, a name carried in silence, the Silent Synod. Unlike the ideological conclaves, unlike the supposed Tricorn Conspiracy, the Synod is not theorized as an organization, but as a phenomenon, a force. Some say it is a myth, others insist it is a mechanism. But for those who vanish in its wake, it is a fact. The Silent Synod is said to be a body of Inquisitors so ancient, so detached from factionalism, that they have become something else entirely. Judges not of heresy or Xenos, not of warpcraft or apostasy, but of the Inquisition itself. They are rumored to convene only in moments of existential crisis, when the Inquisition's own actions threaten the Imperium more than any external enemy, when corruption reaches the marrow, when ideology becomes madness. Their criteria for action are unknowable, their judgments irreversible. And unlike every other force within the Inquisition, they do not seek justification. They do not cite dogma. They do not argue. They act. Descriptions of the Synod vary wildly. Some say they are retired Inquisitors who fake their deaths, operating from hidden citadels on dead worlds. Others claim they are psychically bound minds, a gestalt conscience formed from the most powerful radicals and Puritans alike, merging doctrine and defiance into cold logic. The most esoteric theories claim they are not human at all, that they are the remnants of ancient AI logic engines seeded during the dark age of technology, watching from beneath Mars itself. Regardless of origin, their signature is unmistakable. Where the Synod acts, records die, names are unspoken, not erased, not forbidden, forgotten. Inquisitors who once led sector-spanning purges are suddenly ghosts, their acolytes reassigned, their operations shut down. It is as though they never existed, but the ruins remain, burnt archives, sealed vaults, half-finished campaigns abandoned mid-strike. The world continues, but something is missing, something crucial. There are no accusations, no trials, only disappearances. And among those who speak of the Synod, there is no sense of anger or vengeance, only dread. because to draw the Synod's gaze is to be deemed a threat not just to the Imperium, but to the myth that sustains it. The myth of infallible justice, the myth of righteous autonomy. The Synod does not defend the Emperor's will, they defend the Emperor's mask. In rare cases, signs of their passage leak through the cracks. Interrogator Namir, before his mind was broken in an off-world psyker event, babbled of masked figures beneath a moonless sky whose voices echoed with perfect neutrality. He described a ritual of unmaking, a circle of judgment that passed not sentence, but oblivion. He spoke of names recited backward, of seals inverted, of the rosette turned inward to nullify itself. Another tale comes from Ordo Xeno's records, redacted beyond reason, referring to a silent intervention during the Bleak Beacon protocols. An inquisitor, presumed rogue, was eliminated by unknown assets. Surveillance logs were wiped, autopsies revealed biometric signatures that matched no known operative. And yet, orders were later confirmed as concluded with discretion. When asked to authorize them, no answer was given. No one asked twice. The Synod is also said to possess knowledge forbidden even to the Ordo Malleus, not merely of daemons but of the warp itself, its logic, its reactions. They are rumored to predict ideological corruption the way an astropath predicts a flare. They see patterns in conclave movements, in Ordo memetics, in linguistic drift. They do not act on evidence, they act on inevitability. This makes them terrifying beyond comprehension, because no one is safe. Not the most pious Puritan, not the most visionary radical. If the Synod sees you as the fulcrum of future disaster, you are already undone. Your allies will distance themselves. Your missions will fail. Your name will become dangerous to speak. And then one day, you simply will not be. There are those who seek the Synod, desperate radicals who hope to join, disillusioned Puritans who wish to petition. None have returned. The Synod cannot be found. It finds you. The horror of the Silent Synod is not just in its actions, but in its implications. If it is real, then no inquisitor is truly free. All are under surveillance, all are accountable, but not to any codified law, not to peers, not to tradition, to a judgment so opaque, so final, that no appeal can even be imagined. And yet, in the darkest hours, there are inquisitors who whisper prayers not to the Emperor, but to the Synod. Not in loyalty, but in fear. Fear that they have failed. Fear that no one else will act. Fear that only a power beyond comprehension can cleanse the rot without consuming the bone. The Synod is not salvation. It is not justice. It is annihilation in the name of balance. And if it exists, it is the final judgment not of the heretic, but of the judge. The trials of inquisitors are not trials in any legalistic sense. There is no courtroom, no impartial arbiter, no public record. What the Inquisition calls a trial is more often a reckoning, a moment where power collides with consequence. Yet throughout its shadowed history, there have been instances, however rare, when judgment was rendered with enough clarity to leave behind echoes. Whispers of trials where inquisitors themselves were judged, condemned, or shattered. These fragments offer glimpses into the brutal machinery that governs judgment among the Imperium's most feared agents. One of the most infamous such events is the trial of Inquisitor Lorson Kell. A towering radical of the Ordo Xenos, Kell was known for his integration of alien technology into imperial defenses. His theories were bold, his methods blasphemous, his results undeniable. For decades he operated unchecked, his growing influence protected by a loyal cadre of inquisitors and planetary allies. But when a rival conclave intercepted one of Kell's shipments, Xenos symbiotes genetically modified for human compatibility, it triggered a cascade of alarm. Kell was summoned not to Terra, but to a remote asteroid fortress in the Kulin Reach. There, a conclave of 13 inquisitors convened, not all of whom were known to Kell. No record of this conclave was ever entered into official archives. According to fragmentary accounts retrieved by his former acolyte, Kell was presented with evidence, denounced, and allowed to speak only 3 times. His defenses were philosophical, his justifications tactical. But the conclave had already decided. He was executed with a vortex detonation, his research annihilated. The asteroid itself was destroyed. Such trials are always ad hoc, always cloaked in ideology. The verdicts are predetermined more often than not. In another case, Inquisitor Valerna Sane, a staunch monodominant, was accused by her own interrogator of orchestrating mass purges for political gain. Her trial took place aboard the Black Lexicon, a roving library ship of forbidden knowledge. There, 5 senior inquisitors heard her case. Sane did not refute the charges. She argued their necessity. Her trial ended not in execution, but exile. A fate some consider worse. She was stripped of her rosette, her name redacted, her deeds absorbed by others. She vanished into the void. Even more chilling are the trials that never happen, but are understood to have occurred. Inquisitor Halvorn Tyr was a vocal critic of the Ordo Malleus's secrecy, and his attempts to reveal certain daemon-binding practices led to his ostracization. When his fortress monastery was found abandoned, every servitor offline, every document shredded, it was declared a chaos incursion. But no warp trace was found, and the only surviving log, half corrupted, read, "The court has spoken, no more eyes." Sometimes trials are weapons. A conclave can convene to eliminate a rival under the guise of judgment. Evidence can be fabricated, witnesses silenced. The purity of motive becomes irrelevant. What matters is perception, control of the narrative. A condemned inquisitor is not merely destroyed, they are transformed into a cautionary tale. But there are those rare moments when trials serve something higher. When inquisitors turn inward, not out of rivalry, but necessity. When the line between zeal and madness is crossed so decisively that even allies cannot deny it. In these moments, justice flickers, not as a guiding light, but as a match in the dark. The trial of Inquisitor Magda Cern is cited by some as one such moment. A respected figure of the Ordo Hereticus, Cern uncovered a psyker cult and chose to infiltrate it rather than destroy it. Over time, her methods became indistinguishable from the cult itself. When she finally summoned aid, her peers found a woman who no longer spoke of the Emperor, but of the many-eyed god. Her trial was brief, her execution was solemn, no vengeance, only regret. In each of these trials, a pattern emerges. The accused is isolated, the evidence is always selective, the witnesses are few, and the outcome, whatever form it takes, is definitive. There are no appeals, no records, and once judgment is passed, the subject becomes unmentionable. Even those who survive judgment find themselves erased in all but flesh. They may live, but they no longer exist. This environment ensures silence. Inquisitors do not speak of judgment, not even in private. To question is to draw attention. To remember is to risk association. And so the true number of inquisitorial trials may be far higher than any whisper suggests. They do not accumulate in data files, they accumulate in fear. In the void left by these silences, another presence is sometimes felt. When trials fail to occur, when the system ignores corruption too vast to contain, when peers flinch from judgment, that is when the myths arise again. Of masked figures with no allegiance, of verdicts delivered in the blink of an eye, of operations concluded without a word. They say the Silent Synod acts when all else has failed, when no conclave will convene, when no peer dares accuse, when the threat is not just heretical but systemic, when the rot threatens to become doctrine. It is then that the judges are judged. The High Lords of Terra rule the Imperium in the Emperor's name, a council of ancient power and fractured ambition. The ecclesiarchy wields faith as both sword and shield, shaping the very soul of humanity with its sermons and sanctions. Together they define the laws, doctrines, and dogmas by which the Imperium survives. And yet when it comes to the Inquisition, perhaps the most dangerous institution in all of mankind, they appear curiously absent. Detached, hands-off. Officially, the Inquisition answers only to the Emperor. This is not mere rhetoric. It is a protective clause embedded into the very architecture of imperial governance. The Inquisition was born out of catastrophe, formed in the aftermath of the Horus heresy to root out hidden enemies, both within and beyond. From its inception, it was given latitude that no other organization enjoys. And though the High Lords may convene wars, guide star-spanning crusades, and decree planetary extinction, they do not, cannot, command an inquisitor. But power does not need commands to exert influence. And the question arises, if the High Lords do not judge the Inquisition, do they manipulate it? There is evidence, though always circumstantial. Some inquisitors rise with astonishing speed, granted access to ancient archives and elite resources. Others are quietly buried beneath administrative obstacles, requests lost, reinforcements delayed, communications severed. These patterns suggest a hand behind the curtain, shaping not the actions but the environment in which inquisitors operate. It is whispered that certain High Lords maintain liaisons within the Tricorn palaces, not direct subordinates but informants, sensitive ears and silent mouths, recording shifts in ideology, mapping conclave movements, tracking factional divides. These agents never speak aloud of oversight. They offer advice, support, and sometimes requests, and the wise inquisitor listens, not out of obedience, but out of understanding. Because to ignore the voice of Terra is to risk standing alone when the knives come out. The Ecclesiarchy, meanwhile, maintains a more complex relationship. The Inquisition polices heresy. The Ecclesiarchy defines it. This creates a vicious tension. Most inquisitors respect the Ministerum's dominion over public faith, but reserve the right to reinterpret Scripture as necessity demands. The Ecclesiarchy sees this as blasphemy, tolerated only because the Inquisition is too dangerous to confront directly. When the Ecclesiarchy does move against an inquisitor, it does so subtly. Sermons coded with condemnation, hymns reworded to indict, entire sectors suddenly flooded with missionaries condemning false prophets and arrogant pretenders. The inquisitor in question may not be named, but the message is clear. Their power wanes, their enemies stir. There have been rare seismic moments when the High Lords and the Ecclesiarchy have intervened more directly. The Moray Schism, for instance, saw entire Ordo Hereticus branches excommunicated, not by other inquisitors but by decree of the Ecclesiarch himself. That crisis nearly tore the Ordo apart, and to this day, its records remain sealed by joint order of the Senatorum Imperialis and the Canonical Conclave. But even in such rare cases, no permanent mechanism was created, no lasting tribunal. It remains an act of extraordinary exception, not protocol. The High Lords have no appetite to oversee an institution designed to root out the very corruption they themselves might embody. And the Ecclesiarchy fears the theological flexibility that radical inquisitors so often exhibit. To judge the Inquisition openly would risk revealing the hollowness of their own certainties. Which brings us to a chilling implication. If the Inquisition cannot be judged by those it protects, and will not be judged by those it polices, then who remains? When both Crown and Crozier abstain, when neither law nor faith will intervene, the burden falls inward. The Inquisition must judge itself, or be judged by something darker. This vacuum of authority is what gives weight to the myth of the Silent Synod. For in a system with no true oversight, no external checks, any judgment that does occur must be extra-legal, extra-theological, extra-official. It must emerge not from structure, but from necessity, from dread, from inevitability. Some within the Ecclesiarchy whisper of the Synod with reverence, as if it were a form of divine wrath beyond ecclesiastical understanding. Others claim to have invoked its name in desperate prayer, hoping that it might intervene when inquisitorial excess threatens to unravel worlds. The High Lords never speak of it, not even in private. But the spy masters of the Officio Medicae have red-flagged the term. The Administratum refuses to log it. The Adeptus Arbites dismiss it as a phantom. And yet, the dossiers are always half-redacted. If the Silent Synod exists, then it is not a watchdog for Terra. It is something older than the Senatorum, more merciless than the Ecclesiarchy, and far less corruptible than either. It does not serve the Imperium. It serves its survival. Justice within the Inquisition is not an ideal. It is a weapon. It is forged in secrecy, tempered by fear, and wielded with terrifying precision. But when a tool is used without oversight, without scrutiny, without empathy, it corrodes. It sharpens itself, not into a blade, but into a spike driven inward. This is the tragic paradox of inquisitorial justice, that in its pursuit of heresy, it has become a mirror of the very darkness it was created to destroy. The Inquisition was born to save humanity from its worst enemies, traitors, psychers, daemons, and xenos. But over time, the definitions blurred. Heresy became suspicion. Suspicion became ideology, and ideology became identity. What began as a necessary flexibility to respond to alien threats turned into a doctrine of individual absolutism. Each inquisitor became a microcosm of justice unto themselves, and when every agent is the law itself dies. It is in this climate that justice transforms into injustice, not through dramatic betrayals, but through quiet, incremental cruelty. An inquisitor orders the sterilization of a population, not because they are tainted, but because they might be. Another burns a library of apocryphal texts, not because they are dangerous, but because they contradict doctrine. Another executes an acolyte for hesitating, not because of insubordination, but to set an example. None of these acts are illegal, all are defensible, and that is the horror. When justice ceases to be accountable, it ceases to be moral. The Inquisition does not teach ethics, it teaches necessity. Its agents are trained not to ponder truth, but to ensure survival. And so justice becomes synonymous with action. The question is not, is this right, but will this end the threat? And if it does not, then the next action must be more extreme. Entire ideologies have grown around this corrosion. The monodominants believe all corruption begins with tolerance, that by destroying everything suspect, they protect what is pure. The Amalothians argue that stability is the only virtue, and any disruption, even for truth, is heresy. Radicals justify their actions as preemptive salvation. Recongregators see tyranny as medicine. None believe themselves unjust, all believe themselves righteous. This is how injustice survives, when it wears the mask of belief. The tragedy is most visible not in the decisions of inquisitors, but in their aftermath. Planets left scarred by purges, civilizations broken by doctrinal inflexibility, cultures lost to fire and blade because they evolved outside sanctioned norms. The cost of inquisitorial justice is not always measured in blood, but in silence, in voices never raised, in histories never written. Even within the Inquisition, there are those who see this dissent. Interrogators who watch their masters become tyrants. Acolytes who begin with faith and end in numb compliance. Inquisitors who wake in the middle of the night and wonder if their last decision killed a world or saved it. There is no room for reflection. To doubt is to fracture. And so they push forward, hoping the next act of judgment will redeem the last. But what happens when the injustice becomes institutional? When conclaves are formed not to question, but to reinforce? When entire ordos become echo chambers of zealotry? The answer for many is despair. For others, madness. And for a select few, the rarest, most secretive few, it is action. It is in this context that the Silent Synod becomes more than a myth. It becomes a response, a correction, a virus of judgment designed not to restore justice, but to annihilate its illusion. The Synod does not believe in justice. It believes in consequences. When the Inquisition becomes too broken to fix, too violent to steer, the Synod does not seek to repair. It seeks to purge. And yet, the Synod's own actions raise questions. If they strike without trial, are they any different? If they erase without explanation, do they not perpetuate the same cycle? If they kill without transparency, is their judgment not another form of injustice? These are the questions that make the Synod terrifying, not because it is unjust, but because it reflects the Inquisition's failure so perfectly. It is not an aberration, it is the final consequence. Justice in the Imperium has never been about fairness, it has always been about survival. But when survival is ensured through atrocity, when righteousness is indistinguishable from tyranny, the soul of the Imperium begins to rot. And in that rot, something watches, something judges. The Emperor does not speak, he does not rise from his golden throne, does not intervene in the affairs of mortals, does not command or rebuke. And yet, every action in the Imperium is justified in his name. This silence has become the bedrock of tyranny, the shield of the devout, the license of monsters. But there are those who believe the Emperor's silence is not abandonment, that it is judgment, that it is the stillness before the reckoning. And in that shadow, something stirs, something final. If the Silent Synod exists, and by now, after the whispers and disappearances and erasures, who can truly doubt it? It is not a political tool. It is not a faction. It is not even an inquisition within the Inquisition. It is the echo of the Emperor's gaze. It is the embodiment of a truth long denied. That power must answer to something greater than itself, even in a galaxy where gods are dead and faith is a weapon. The Synod does not act to preserve institutions. It does not serve dogma. It serves only one principle, that unchecked power becomes its own enemy, that even the hand of the Emperor can tremble. When the Inquisition loses itself in rivalry, in madness, in ideologies that devour worlds, the Synod acts not to save it, but to reset it. Not to heal it, but to amputate. This is why so many fear it, not because it is cruel, but because it is necessary. Because it does what others cannot. When conclaves collapse into infighting, when Ordos burn their own archives, when trials become executions without context, the Synod watches. It waits, and when it moves, there is no grand declaration, no parade of virtue, only silence. The Emperor's shadow is long, and in its length it warps everything. The Synod moves within that shadow, invisible but real, terrible, but just enough to keep the greater terrors at bay. It is the conscience the Inquisition cannot afford to admit, the reckoning it can never acknowledge, a null space where justice is restored not through process, but through annihilation of the unjust. But in the darkest irony, the Synod is also a mirror. For if it is true that it judges the judges, who then judges it? If the Synod operates beyond law, beyond scripture, beyond oversight, how long before it becomes the very corruption it seeks to destroy? Is there a deeper circle? A darker silence? Or does the cycle end here, with the Synod as the last recourse, the final whisper of order before the galaxy collapses into fire? Some Inquisitors dream of being seen by the Synod, not to die, but to be acknowledged. To know that someone still watches with clarity, with purpose, with balance. Others dread it, knowing that their deeds, no matter how buried, might one day speak too loudly. And for most, the Synod remains legend. A bedtime tale for acolytes, a superstition whispered in war zones, but the Inquisition is not eternal. Its agents are flawed, its systems fractured, its victories tainted. The Emperor does not correct their path. He does not speak, he does not save. And so something else must. The Silent Synod is not hope, it is not salvation, it is the end of all excuses. When the time comes, and the darkness is no longer outside but within, it will be there. Not with fury, not with faith, but with finality. If this tale stirs something in you, curiosity, dread, a flicker of grim admiration, then know that the galaxy holds far more secrets, far more terrors, and far more truths than the Inquisition dares to admit. Subscribe to uncover them. Join the circle, before the Synod finds you first.